I'll introduce myself. My name is Ricky. I'm with the Youth Association. If you have gone to Unix events, Lisa, for example, you can see me there. I've been to Scale quite a few times. I used to work at Linux and Media and did a Linux Pro magazine booth and a Ubuntu User magazine. And before that, I worked on Sysadmin magazine, which is how I became familiar with the Unix Association. And if you don't know about it, stop by my booth and I'll give you the spiel. We have a pretty diverse organization. It's been around since 1975. And last year, we launched Women in Advanced Computing workshop and summit, and we have another one this month at our Federated Conferences Week. And it is for women who are mostly established in their careers. Some are just getting started, recent college graduates. And so we have discussed quite a few topics around getting hired and mobility in your career and dealing with diverse teams or teams that aren't diverse where you're maybe a minority on your team. And so one thing that we'd heard quite a bit, and I've heard for years, we don't have any women, for example, and this could be diversity in general, but I will be talking about women because I am a woman. But we don't have any because we didn't have anyone apply. And so that's where I came up with the idea for this talk, because if you aren't having any diversity at all in your applications, in your recruits, then you're doing something wrong. And I might not have all the answers for your organization because I imagine you're all from very different companies. But at least, hopefully I'll introduce some ideas for you to consider if you're having a hard time recruiting. I'm not going to talk about why you want a diverse team. I assume you already want one if you're in here. And so if you aren't sure why you want diversity on your team, then that's something you'll definitely need to explore more with your company. There are a lot of reasons why. I mean, obviously they've done a lot of studies that show that more diversity in your team does improve productivity and overall happiness and functionality of the team. But mostly I'm going to talk about how you get started recruiting, and then we'll touch on how do you onboard a new hire, and then what do you need to do to make sure that you can retain somebody for hopefully a while. So if you look at statistics, women are 57-ish% of the workforce, and obviously it's a much smaller percentage in the tech field, STEM fields in general. Open source, which is my background, the figures are around 2%, 5%, something like that. So there's definitely a problem, particularly since there's such demand in technology now. You would think that we would be able to get more women involved and more women who want to work here, because there definitely are jobs here. And so the women are out there. We just have to look at how we make sure that they know about our particular companies and our offerings. And we'll touch on diversity in general. Obviously, Hispanics and people of color or from maybe different financial backgrounds, educational backgrounds, aren't fairly represented in the tech field also. Black workers, for example, this study was from the Department of Professional Employees. It's a pretty recent study, I think from 2012, with 10% of the labor force, but only 6.9% of computer and math occupations. And then, of course, there's the disparity on earnings, which this is not new, that women make less money. Black, Hispanic employees, Hispanic women are making much less money than white men. So when you're talking about diversity in your organization, what diversity is going to look like in your organization is going to be different among organizations. And you have to look at who you already have and what is it that you need in your organization. What are you missing? What kind of personality types or what skill sets are you missing? For example, you would maybe you want to increase representation of women by a certain percentage or number in your organization. Often you'll see women in support roles, perhaps, but not in engineering roles. And women across the board would have perhaps different offerings, backgrounds, and the market's different for women. And if you look at I don't know if you saw the big offering, the big pin, for example, that was on. I don't know that a woman came up with that idea. Or if you look at phones maybe that are marketed to women, often they're pink. I personally don't want a pink phone, and so I'm not so sure that a woman came up with that idea even. It might be what somebody thought we wanted. You also need to look at 3 or 4 talent profiles that would be within your company. For example, let's say you want somebody who is a Python programmer, but you also need somebody who can represent your organization at conferences, maybe somebody who is more outgoing personality, somebody who is more social, can speak at events, or somebody who has a nice strong leadership role and can maybe have a nice programming engineering background and be geared towards managing a team. So once you outline a few of the talent profiles you need, that's when you can go out and start adjusting how you're recruiting and where you're recruiting. And right now, let's see, the end of last year, tech unemployment was about 3.3%. Q1 this year, it was at 4.4%. Unemployment in general in the U.S. right now is close to 8%. And so it's tech employees are definitely in demand right now. And so instead of thinking about employees selling themselves to you, you need to be thinking about how are you selling yourself in your organization and your team to other employees and to new hires. So you need to think about what their needs, desires, and expectations are. Well, you're not going to know. They're going to be different for different people, and all women are not going to want the same thing. And so when you're thinking about what you can offer your new hires or your recruits, you need to have some adaptability in mind and be able to adjust to meet specific hires' needs and desires and expectations so that you can get them on board and then keep them on board. You also need to be thinking about where these people are hanging out online and at events or in your community. And they're not all going to be on Dice.com or Monster.com. They aren't all going to check out Craigslist for your job posting. So if you're looking at, for example, you want someone with Python, strong Python skills, you can advertise that, but then think about the events that are Python focused or the networking groups that are Python focused. I'm just using Python, I don't know why, it could be anything. And then we get back to employee value proposition. What is the employee going to get out of working for you? And so you are going to be selling yourself as much as the employee is going to be trying to sell themselves, since they do have a lot more options than you probably have right now. And that's where branding comes in. And you have to think about how you're branding your organization. I think the startups tend to not put enough thought into that. More established organizations like Rackspace, for example, or Google has spent a little more time on branding what kind of a culture they're going to have. Startups tend to maybe try to be a little more hip and fast-paced or exciting, or, you know, we have a keg in the kitchen, or whatever offerings they have. And so if you're branding yourself that way, you're also going to be limiting the kind of people who are going to want to apply for your company. Google, for example, does an excellent job of branding their organization. They are obviously much bigger than your organization, I assume. But if you look at their wording on their site for the hiring process, before a recruit would even apply there, they are very aware of what the culture is going to be. They're very aware of what the application process is going to be, who's going to be interviewing them, and then whether or not they're going to fit into the culture there. They have their statement, do cool things that matter, which that's not going to turn off maybe anybody. Everybody wants to do something cool that matters. Other people, if you say it's a hip, cool, fun place, you might get millennials or whatever. I'm Gen X, that's not as important to me now. And so you're definitely going to narrow yourself with that kind of branding. Google explains on their site that they're looking for 4 things. And leadership is a big one. And leadership is pretty broad, but they're obviously looking for strong personality types. But then role-related knowledge. They talk about on their site that they want a variety of strengths and passions and not just isolated skill sets. So they're a little more open in the kind of personalities that they're looking for. And if you go look at Dice or Monster.com or any of those, you'll see that sometimes they're very specific about personalities. And I'll show some examples that can be a turnoff before anyone even submits a resume. How you think is another one. This sounds very general, but one thing that Google does right, I think, is they say we're less concerned about grade and transcripts and more interested in how you think. And that's good for those of us who don't test well, but if we are good performers in the workplace, it's good to know off the bat because you are limiting yourself again by looking. Where that comes in well is they are making sure in advance that they're getting people who are going to fit well and like the culture that they're presenting, which is also something you want to make sure you're presenting to your recruits, that they're going to be interested in what you have to offer them. Google is also very well respected for having very diverse employees. They celebrate just about any kind of a cultural celebration. They have, I think, Gay Pride week. They had an ice cream truck come. There's a gay exclusive, branded ice cream truck that they had come, and they do fun stuff like that, where it's very exciting and fun, and everybody can feel included. Depending on whatever personality types you have. So I ran across the Anita Borg Institute Solutions to Recruit Technical Women, and if you're interested in getting more women in your team, I highly recommend this report. I think it's about a year old, and Anita Borg Institute is very good. They have the sisters list, and you have to be a woman, I think, to get on it, and a technical woman, but they definitely know what they're talking about when it comes to recruiting women. But this is a freely available PDF on their site, and I'll post my slides so you have that link. But that report outlines 4 blind spots when it comes to hiring for women in particular. The first one was concentrating recruitment on a small number of sites, which I mentioned before. If you're just looking at Monster.com or Dice or whatever, you're really limiting who you're going to get. Particularly if there are probably people out there that want your job, but they aren't actually job hunting. And so they're not going to go to these sites, and that's where you need to make sure that your message is out to them. Narrow recruitment criteria, and that's where if you're looking at, they have to have a specific degree or 2 years of experience or 4 years of experience. That actually might not be what's most important to your company. If they have the skill set but not actually the 2 years of experience, but they're equally skilled with 1 year or fresh out of college, those are the people you want to make sure you're not turning off before they even send an application in. Women have a reputation for undervaluing our skill sets, or thinking we're not qualified. And even though you might consider somebody who had less qualifications, if your ad, or your position says, I want 2 years, you might not even get those people because they just assume you want 2 years when their application might have actually stood out to you. And then hiring processes that are implicitly biased. A lot of people are looking at a lot of recruiters are looking at doing the blind review of resumes. Because if you take the study I've linked to here, if you take equal resumes and skill set with a male sounding name and female sounding name, my name's Ricky, so this doesn't apply to me, but if you take those equal, even women recruiters often will value the male resume as looking more qualified, and it's not a conscious bias, but there are plenty of reports and studies that show that this actually happens. So you might want to do some kind of a blind review of all of your resumes so that you're not unconsciously ruling people out based on their sex. And then lack of organizational infrastructure. This will be an issue, particularly if you're in a smaller organization. Getting over bronchitis here. If you're in a smaller organization, maybe you don't have an HR team or a specific HR person, you're still going to want somebody who has some kind of HR background or knowledge going out and recruiting. I know often it will be a manager of a team that actually has to go out and do the recruiting. And obviously they're going to want to be part of the hiring process, but they might not be the best one to actually go out and do the recruiting because they're not going to have an HR background. And so if they don't have an HR background, that is something you need to look at, getting some kind of at least HR training on board before they go out and recruit. The other thing that the Anita Borg study looked at were different recruitment avenues to consider when you're trying to get women or diversity in general. Obviously, you would want to go to CareerBuilder and Monster.com or any of the sites like that where people who are actually job hunting would be. But colleges are also a really great way to recruit, and they have job fairs at colleges all the time, and that's a wonderful way to get people on board. And then conferences are, and I guess you're all here, so you know how valuable this is for job hunting and for networking. But like any of the Python conferences or our events, Scale, all these events are wonderful places to find people who might not even be job hunting, but then they come to your booth and then they find out about your organization and whatever projects you're working on, and you might have a new hire there that didn't know they wanted to be your new hire. Yes?
Meetups.
Pardon?
Meetups.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the kind of things you need to look at. Where are the people that you want hanging out? I'm in a running group in Lawrence, Kansas. Jacob Kaplan-Moss, who created Django, runs in my group, and several other people who work with him. We have a lot of Python developers. And so if you're a runner, ask, because you probably have a lot of geeks that run. For some reason, they run. I don't know why. But we also have, they do developer meetups at bars every once in a while in my community. And then there's some social media groups that meet, and then we have our college that has, all the different engineering fair or whatever. So there are definitely quite a few ways to network there. Professional organizations are a great way. Usenix, I have to plug us here, but it doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to be a member to recruit through Usenix. You can post job listings. And we're not the only one. I mean, there are plenty of other professional organizations that want you to come and recruit their members, because that's a service that we're offering our members. And then you're getting a highly qualified set of, skills out of the organizations. Social networks. If you're not using Twitter and Facebook and G+ to recruit, you're missing out. We have job boards on our G+ site, for example, and if I see postings that look like they'd be an interesting fit, I'm on the sisters list, for example, and if it looks like a cool job, like I'll announce that. A lot of women do that. You might not see that going on, but we're doing word of mouth through these social media. It didn't cost you anything. You just send out a tweet that you have this cool position, and encourage your colleagues to make sure that they're letting everybody know about this position too through the social networks. And then creating an internship program is a really good way, because you get a test drive, your intern, they get a test drive the organization, they can pick up some skills while they're there, and again, they're going to help, let other people know about your organization and any positions that you might have open. I asked quite a few women I know about the kinds of things that were turnoffs to them when it comes to recruiting. And one woman in particular did a very good job, very thorough job of sending me a list, and so I'll show you examples. But she actually went through and looked at a bunch of ads and sent me a note outlining when she read certain words in ads what it said to her about the ad. So you'll see rockstar, expert, top-notch performers, and ninja. You're not probably speaking to me, or Gen X if you say ninja. Or rockstar. You won't be speaking to people with imposter syndrome if you say expert, because there are a lot of experts who don't call themselves experts because they're hanging out with really, like developers that wrote, the kernel or whatever, and so compared to that, they wouldn't be an expert, but maybe they're perfectly expert for your team. So watch out for words like that in your ads, because this is how she said she reads these ads, and I think she did a good job of summarizing this for a lot of women. Fast-paced and dynamic. That on one hand, that could be really fun. On another hand, that could be very stressful work environment. Where you're working all day and night, and the target's moving constantly, and you're having to redo work. I've worked in places like this, and that's fast-paced. Dynamic. Passionate is another one to watch out for. Some people really like their jobs and want to enjoy their jobs, but they would say it's just a great job, and they're really passionate about water skiing or crochet or whatever it is. So yeah, she said verbally lack of professionalism, and you see that I think in a lot of smaller organizations, maybe in startups. High achievers reap the greatest rewards. This is going to be a turnoff to people with imposter syndrome, or people who maybe are less outgoing, maybe not quite as social. They're people who fly below the radar, who aren't good at self-promotion. And this is where you would be picturing the person who's always like me, and throwing everyone under the bus and doing a better job of taking credit for everyone. Those are the people who are getting rewarded. These are actual ads I found on Dice.com. I found so many ads that were almost comical, and I had to cut it down quite to these few samples. But this one ends with,
that's just going to turn off a lot of people.
yeah, exactly.
Across the board.
And so maybe that's really what you want, but if you're actually trying to get diversity, you just eliminated a whole lot of people from even applying. Webster guy, there are so many that said guy, or they'll say if you're the right guy or a girl. A lot of women don't like to be called girls. I don't care because I'm in my 40s now, that's fine, but I'm okay with it. Excuse me. This one, again, it's all male verbiage. I'm assuming, a guy wrote it. And there are probably no women on this team already. This is my favorite. Because they talk about how diverse they are, but then they're as diverse as fly fishing and armed services to musicians and motorcycle racing. We even have a guy that could probably set some sort of world record for the ability to grow a full-on beard the fastest. And then they go on and repeat how diverse they are. So... I don't think they have women on their team. And there are a lot of women Ruby developers that just aren't going to apply for this job probably. And look, they like fly fishing. Etsy has done a very good job of recruiting because they have 80% of their customer base are women, and they realized that they weren't recruiting women. The women were in more support roles. They weren't having women developers, and that's a problem for many reasons, but particularly if you have mostly women customers, it's kind of hard to create for that audience when you don't even have any members of that group in your team. So in 2012, they with some other groups kicked in money for living stipends for hacker school sessions. And so they're not lowering their standards of job skills or anything. They're making it easier for people to get into this training program. And then they can recruit out of this training program. And if you've done recruiting, it can be very expensive to actually get somebody hired. And then if they turn around and quit, you start all over again, and it can cost a fortune to recruit. So in 2011, out of 47 engineers, they only had 3 that were women. And a year after they started their program, they had a 500% increase in how many female engineers they had on board. Onboarding. I'm not an HR person, but my best friend is, and so she threw out onboarding for me, and then I did all this research on it. And onboarding is the next important step after you actually have recruited and you hired somebody. This is a vital step. I don't know if you've been hired before in a job where they just throw you in and they give you the computer, or you bring your own, and they dump some stuff off, and you're supposed to go for it because you are supposed to show initiative and whatever. But they missed a huge component on making sure you're engaged in the organization and feeling like a part of it, and networking and having connections there, and excited about even starting at this. Generally, people decide within the first few months. Sometimes I've decided within the first few hours if I want to stay in an organization. But so the onboarding process is very important. Etsy has totally nailed this. The first week, they have the new hires spend with their team, new team members, and then they spend the next 4 to 6 weeks rotating them through the other groups in the organization. And this has several benefits. It gives the new hires a better view of what the whole organization does, how it works, all the different parts, all the different teams that are participating. But it also helps them network and make connections within the company. And so if you have a single woman perhaps on her new team, but there are other women working in other teams, or other people that she has things in common with, she will have at least have a network started off in her new position. And again, retaining new hires does start with the onboarding process. And then the next step would be reducing burnout. And I had a position where I had this discussion with my boss before about some of our hires when I was in a management position, and I told him, when somebody was getting burnout, when they're burnout, it's too late. And you can't go in and fix all the problems. And burnout is burnout, it's done. And so, this is where you need to look at making sure that your employees have the right work-life balance and the right challenges for their position. or if they want to pick up new skills, that they're having those opportunities. And you're not going to know what these are without checking in with everybody. And that's where you also do the motivation checks. And where I am now at USNIX, I had been there less than a year when they did a stay interview with me, which I had never heard of before. And it was wonderful because they asked me all these questions about, what could somebody else offer me to make me leave the job, and or what is it that I would need in a year to make me still be interested in my job, or what benefits would I like to see in the future, or where do I see myself in 5 years? And those are the things that you need to be thinking about if you're going to try to retain somebody, and those will change over time, and so you can't just ask somebody when you hire them. You need to do these motivation checks regularly. And I linked to a source here, this DICE.com report had some very good practical, and that's one of the things I try to do here. There's a lot of this information. I try to pick out a few key ones for you. What you think you're offering now is probably not what anybody wants. If you're having a hard time getting a diverse team, it's what one group wants. DICE did an employer survey with companies to find out what they were offering to retain employees. And this is a list of what the companies were offering, what they thought people wanted, the benefits they thought they were offering. But then they went ahead and interviewed tech professionals, and what the tech professionals said they wanted were very different than what the employers were offering. And so I'm going to leave time at the end here because I talk fast, and so we can talk about specific. But think about also with the job market the way it is now, when it is, the job hunters market. It's not your market. I mean, there are plenty of jobs and not enough talent. If you're paying people less, if you're paying women less, this is very normal to do because you expect people to negotiate their salary. Once somebody finds out that they're making less than a colleague for a similar position, it's probably too late to retain them. You've already pissed them off at that point, So think about having a level playing field at the very beginning. It's old school to think that people are going to negotiate up. Maybe they will once their foot is in the door, but think of offering a flat rate or however it is, but where it's not based on whoever has better negotiation skills necessarily. Also think about, do you have a baseline for fairness on compensating or rewarding? Are you only rewarding the squeaky wheels? Are you only rewarding people who are the loudest, who take the most credit? Are you recognizing people who are actually doing a lot but not pointing out everything they do? Also, do you have career advancement avenues? I guess the millennials like to pick up, this is broad obviously, but new skills and know that they are able to jump ship if they want to. You don't want them to jump ship, but you want to make sure that they feel like you're providing them everything to be happy at their job. Or do they want to advance out of management into just a developer program or just developing role? Or do they want to pick up managing skills? Do they want to pick up new skills? Think about how you're going to offer those things to retain your talent so that they don't have to go find a job somewhere else. And are you offering equal opportunities? And then also think about how you connect your new hire to external networks, particularly if you're hiring anybody who will be some kind of a minority on your team, that's if you have all white, middle-aged white guys right now, and you're going to hire your first woman on the team, maybe she fits in great and feels perfectly comfortable, but make sure that you're also giving her other opportunities to network at events or local events or through organizations, perhaps, social networks and that sort of thing. And that's where I would plug like our events. Any kind of, or this kind of event, this is where people are able to go and network, and they don't have to be high-cost events. It can be a local event. But I know that a lot of budgets are cut and people don't value the networking opportunities like they did 10 years ago. But that is something that people need to be rethinking about now, particularly if you're trying to increase the diversity on your team. Excuse me. And like I said, we did start our Women in Advanced Computing conference and summit last year to address a lot of these topics. We do provide the videos from our talks are freely available on our website, and We do encourage men and women to come to our events, and we are not the only event like this. Like I said, Grace Hopper has a bunch. This kind of event is very diverse. Scale is a wonderful event in Los Angeles, and it's very family friendly also. So, sorry, I'm still recovering. But I would like to open up for questions now. If anyone has questions. Yes?
You use the term imposter-syndrome. I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, okay. I love that one. I didn't know about it either, and when I got hired at Linux New Media quite a few years ago, doing as soon as I got hired, and I started, she goes, oh yeah, it's imposter syndrome. And so I looked it up, and it's very common with women in the sciences and STEM fields, and men also, but it's more of a women's issue where you undervalue your skill set. You feel like you're a fake. You feel like you don't actually have the talent, and that people are going to figure it out. It's very bizarre. There are tons of research articles and books on it, and that's where recognizing that that's an issue even before you go in and recruit is going to help, because often a woman and a man will go in with equal experience and skills, and the woman will say she knows this much and the guy will say he knows this much, you know, and it's the same level of education or experience, and that's one of the symptoms of imposter syndrome. Any other questions? Yes?
You gave a lot of negative examples of things not to do in job listings. Do you have some replacements? Because clearly people are putting those words in there because they're looking for somebody who's going to get into their work and become attached to their work and become involved. Do you have some kind of positive replacements or some examples of good job listings?
Well, I would say look at Google, for example, and how they do their recruiting on their website. And then, you know, you don't want to have the job posting be too specific because you don't want to narrow the criteria. And that's where the networking, where you're reaching out and letting people know about the position. Because often, I mean, I've gotten jobs before where people didn't know I was the one they wanted to hire because I didn't have the skills they thought that they wanted. And then they realized that the things that they thought they wanted, there were a few things I could pick up, and then I had this other skill set that would meet some other needs, you know, and so that's where you don't want to be too specific, you know, but that's where the networking will help if you go and recruit at a booth, for example. Google had a booth at PosCon when I was there a couple months ago, and it's just, you know, one person standing at the booth, but people were able to come up and talk, you know, and he was able to tell them about, oh yeah, you would fit in great here, or this is what we're needing over here, you know, and they could find out more about the organization. And yeah, I would just say you don't, anytime you're saying he, you know, or the great group of guys, or the, if you're the right guy or gal, that's where they're trying to be equal. That was another one I thought was funny. You don't have to say that. I'm against they because it's not grammatically correct, but you kind of have to go with that. Excuse me. Any other questions? Yes?
Oh, I was just going to comment to that. I think you can say that you have opportunities for advancement as opposed to saying, we're looking for someone who can work day and night. I mean, if you want someone who's going to be invested in your company, then saying we have opportunities for advancement, then someone's reading that and thinking like, oh, okay, so this is a place I could work for a couple of years, and that would be good, as opposed to like, you know, work long hours and, you know, don't sleep and...
Google has a lot of wording like that on their site too, about you know, wanting to make sure that you fit in and you like it there, and that they're meeting your needs, which is what, you know, when you're out job hunting, that's really, you're looking at what's in it for me, you know, even though you're trying to convince them that you're the right person for the job. Yes?
I had a comment and a question, I guess. I really enjoyed the presentation. A year ago, I started in an organization, and we have all the right language, the right words, and all that. But one thing that now, as an organization, we're trying to change is our own internal culture. Because, like, it gets complex. So not everything's, you know, the binary male, female. So, like, within men, most of our staff is a small organization, nonprofit. In my mind, like, they're like geniuses, right? They know all this stuff. I have my own thing going, but like, I'm like, oh my god. So I defer. I do that thing, like, you know. And a lot of times I'm like, that doesn't sound right, and it isn't right. but I won't say anything. But, so we have this culture where like, the men in our organization, white men and men of color that know a lot and have formal education, they kind of like shoot down women's voices, and then like
Right.
people like myself, right? So now we're starting to look at what can we do as an organization to change that, and up to now, that I get to say whatever I want. So I was like, it's like the intellectual masturbation here. It's like, what are you guys doing? Like
Right.
when we talk with our clients, they're everyday people. So you guys wonder why you can't connect, all that. So that whole idea of looking at what we can change as well, like not just in our words and all that, not
Yeah,
paid, but in our
absolutely.
culture, with women, if you talk to women of color, then you have this whole division as well, right? Like white women, women of color. With men, you have like class issues, like people without college and then people super highly educated. So it's really complex.
Well, it is, and there's no right answer, and that's why I was saying I can't tell anybody what they have to do. I just want to make sure that you're expanding the way you think and not stuck in hiring practices that are totally outdated now. And you're talking about individuals, and when I say women, it doesn't really mean anything. We're all different, and like I'll have people come up to me after events and say, did whatever offend you? And I'm like, well, no, but I'm not the benchmark to go off of here, just because that didn't offend me. I could see why somebody else would have been upset about that, So yeah, there's no one answer for that, but it is something that you have to look at,
And we're trying to move forward, so we all believe in change. So we're trying to change the culture.
Right. Well, in Usenix, for example, and I have business cards up here too. I'm the community manager, and if you are having problems recruiting, that's not my specialty, but I definitely know people, and I can help you find different avenues, and introduce you to contacts that might be able to help you. But we have a lot of PhDs, and people, researchers from NASA and that sort of thing. And so I think that, like, if you're on a team and everyone's a PhD and you're not, that would also be an issue where, that could be a cultural problem, and even if you don't have a PhD, you might be equally important to that organization, but, excuse me. Yes.
So just a comment actually, so something that I'm from Rackspace, and something that we've just recently started doing, and a lot of companies do it too, we have employee resource groups, so that way you can keep your inside culture actually committed to providing safe spaces for different groups of people. So as an example, we have like an LGBT resource group, we have a women's empowerment resource group, an African American, and veterans, we're starting a Hispanic Americans one. So it's just something more to kind of keep committed to diversity within it. Like we just had a huge Diversity Day celebration where all the groups came out and did stuff.
Yeah, and those kind of things are great. Like, women's groups that are in technology, and some people think that they're trying to isolate themselves by being in these groups, and that's not it at all. It's a different networking opportunity. I have a publishing background, for example, when people would tell me, oh, I don't read print, I only read online, my answer is, you don't have to just pick one, you can do both, and that's the same thing with these organizations, you can be part of several groups, and it's just a different way to meet people that you have things in common with, and it's nice to meet people that you don't have things in common with, and feed off of, those kind of experiences. Excuse me. Other questions? Yes?
So at the start of your talk, you mentioned, or you were showing the discrepancies in representation of different groups within the tech workforce. And I'm wondering how much of that tracks back to, for example, like computer science programs. I think, from my experience, typically there's more men in those kinds of programs than women. And I'm wondering how much of this is representative of the amount of trained people you have coming out of schools.
Well, yeah, it goes way back to that. I have been I started working at Sysama magazine when my daughter was only a few months old, and she just graduated from high school. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about these topics, and I do think it, for the United States, I don't know, I can't speak for other countries, but the problem goes all the way back to elementary school. My child has had a computer from the very beginning because of what I do. Even when I've been a single mom, if we didn't have hot water, we got internet, and that's just the way it is. But that's not normal, that's not for everybody. And this past school year, I was delighted when she I was like, fine, I'll take a programming class. You know, because I've been trying to get her to forever. And she had her first 16th birthday. She's like, can I get a Mac? Because she's had Linux forever, you know. And I was like, fine. So she comes home and what do you guys? Is it Python, the PG? What are you learning? She's like, Visual Basic. I'm like, what? That wasn't even on my list. And she's the only girl in class. And that was all fine because she doesn't care, you know. And then she comes home after a few weeks and she's like, the guys are making fun of me, saying I should go make sandwiches. And I was like, welcome to my hell. You know? I totally get it. And what happened was she was better than a lot of the guys in her class. And she was trying to help them. And so then she had this little microcosm of what goes on in our field, you know. And I couldn't help her with it. She just had to get through the class and get an A, you know. And I can't go fix that one class. But yeah, it goes all the way back. You know, none of the girls that she went to school with knew about this class or would have even thought about it. She knew she needed to take this because I kept telling her to take a programming class. I wouldn't have told her to take that one. I didn't know that was the one that was offered.
It's a very masculine idea of teamwork. Who's going to charge over the trench first? Who's going to charge forward and get the things to work or get the problem fixed? That's my idea of teamwork. Is that who's the designated kamikaze to solve the problem? And I know that my daughters are interested in computers and programming, and at the same time, I don't think that culture of teamwork is what makes any sense to them.
I guess I just see it differently because I'm not you. And I have a very strong leadership personality, and so and I have often worked with quite a few tech men, and with authors I work with and in my organizations, and that's fine. I'm not one of the people that would say I prefer working with women or men. I prefer to work with people who are pleasant to work with, you know. So I think that any team, though, you have to recognize all the members of the team, and everybody's going to have different strengths, and you're going to have the leadership personalities, and then you're going to have the people who don't want to be out there and who want to work the certain schedule and like to have certain assignments, and that's a very nice function also, and that doesn't have to be masculine or feminine, you know. Working at Usenix, I mean, there are all kinds of women who are professors and women who work at NASA and whatever, and the personality types are all over the place. If you go to our website, you can see the panel discussions we had. We have videos of the ones from last year up there, and the organizers did a very good job of picking out very different personality types of these women on the panel, and you can kind of see the spectrum.
My office is kind of like the mad scientist kind of culture, and it's by design that way.
Well, then maybe you don't want to get more diversity in your team if you like it, but there are a lot of women who might work very well in that kind of environment too.
It's not intended to be exclusionary, but that's the consensus of the people there. That's the way we like it.
Well, I guess if you're happy with it, then, I mean, if it's working for you, I don't know, but if you are trying to get some diversity in your group and
But I'm also the parent of two girls that didn't go to school.
Absolutely, and you're doing them a huge disservice by not encouraging them to be involved in technology, because that's where the jobs are. And I would rather my daughter, builds websites instead of wait tables through college. It would have worked better for me. I waited tables, which was fine, and great job. But in hindsight, if I didn't know how to build a website, I probably would have enjoyed doing that more in my room, than spending hours at a restaurant. And that's a skill set now that I can do that. It has come in very handy, even though that's not my actual job. Having these tech skills in anything you're doing now. I mean, if you're an accountant, or if you work in a restaurant, it's all computer stuff now. Every time I'm in a restaurant, they say their systems are down. I'm like, are you running Windows?
The good news I took out of your presentation is that we can avoid doing boneheaded things to put women off from the get-go. We can be smarter about that.
Yes, you can change what you're doing to at least get more diverse pool of applicants, and there's no reason why you wouldn't want a more diverse pool of applicants to begin with.
When do you do consulting on this type of thing with talk with companies who want to diversify more? And if so, this is kind of a two-parter. If so, culture is very ingrained and it's difficult to change. What are some strategies that you've seen used or used yourself to kind of move that process along?
My background isn't in HR. I've done HR as part of my job. My background is in publishing, tech publishing, and I did my thesis when I got my master's in journalism on how to highlight women's contributions to open source, and that's where my interest is, because part of the problem is there are women in our field that don't actually get recognized or don't do a good job of promoting themselves or speaking at events or networking, and that was what I was looking at, because I do think that's one of the many pieces of getting more women involved, is to make sure that they see the cool stuff that women are already doing. There are women here, and they're doing a lot of cool stuff, right? So I'm not qualified to consult. I'm pretty good at networking, and part of USNIC, it's an association, Advanced Communities Association, and our job boards are one of the big member benefits, and I can definitely take my card, and I can definitely put you in touch with people who can help you with that. It just depends on what you're looking for. As far as changing the culture, it is something that is a work in progress, and it just, there's no one recipe depending on your organization. Like Etsy, for example, I mean, they came up with a pretty innovative way to get more women on board, with their training that they did and the stipends. And at our organization, we want more students, and so we provide student grants. And then Google has partnered with us to provide some grants for women, and then we also want to make sure that people who might be out of work or are retired can come, and so we offer discounts, and so that's how we're trying to make sure that we diversify our group and make sure, we have a nice mix. And so you just have to look at your organization and maybe, lay it out there. And like I said, look at the personality types you're hunting for, look at what you already have, where are your weaknesses, and then you just have to come up with a plan and chip away at it. It won't happen overnight.
So you have the glorious imposter-syndrome.
I was gonna comment on changing the culture. I think sometimes when organizations or projects decide they want to change the culture, they go back with a list of things that they want their current people to not do, without saying, like, we want to increase the number of people participating in our project, we want to grow our user base. You might have noticed half the world is populated by women. We thought we could tap into that. And I want everyone's buy-in. And so that means that we're going to change a couple of little things. If everyone's on board with possibly doubling our user base and increasing the number of people participating, then we're going to do these things. As opposed to come by and be like, here's a list of words no one is allowed to say anymore without any background. Because then it feels like, as opposed to like, big picture, come be part of the future. So, in broad strokes, if you think of it that way, then you might get off to a better, faster start.
You have that? I thought you pulled it off.